think about the poor starving kids in India, and they don't have enough food. And I wasn't smart enough at that particular time to hand her my plate and say, give me some postage stamps. I'm sending this plate of food to India. You're told to eat what you're given.
Yeah.
If you don't eat those green peas, we're not going to give you any dessert, as if the dessert was actually better for you than the green peas. And the way out of that habit is by what we refer to as mindfully eating. Okay, so we've been using the example of uh, thinking about chocolate, but it can be almost anything, but that's a good enough example.
Yeah.
Um, and there's something kind of curious about food. Generally, when we're really little kids, we're very impressionable. So that something will happen, and then that happening is associated with food. For instance, somebody goes away on a trip or something, they say goodbye, and then grandma, who's left there, will give you some food to eat as a sort of get over the fact that mommy's just taken off. And so that food then tastes especially good to the child. And so when we become an adult, we'll have that thought about that food, thinking that it's going to satisfy us the way that it did at that time when we were a kid, and it winds up not.
Sounds about correct.
Okay. So, one of the qualities then of learning how to eat is to eat now and taste what we're having now, to put all of our energy into how does this taste? What are the sensations in the mouth? And in fact, if I decide that it's not delicious enough or satisfying enough, then stop eating it.
It's a
And yet, we don't do that.
it's a
Almost
compulsion.
as well. Yes, perhaps we can call it a compulsion. That's what it's been labeled. Um, a better way of looking at it, though, is just an old habit. When we use words like compulsion, it means we're almost forced to do it beyond our will. But you know that, oh no, that compulsion is not compulsion because I do have will, and I will stop. And so you can play with that in the sense of, um, oh, the experiment would be every time that you eat chocolate, only eat half of that chocolate and then throw the rest of it away or give it to a dog or flush it down the toilet or give it to a friend or throw it in the yard or whatever. But you stop before you finish. That's a good habit to develop, as opposed to the bad habit that's already developed is I've got to eat everything. And that, especially for those kids who were raised right after World War II, but it lasted a long time, that mothers, even coming out of the Depression, out of the 1930s, when things were really bad, um, that the moms would get the idea that, oh, the kids should eat everything. My mom would even go so far as to say, think about the poor starving kids in India, and they don't have enough food. And I wasn't smart enough at that particular time to hand her my plate and say, give me some postage stamps. I'm sending this plate of food to India. But instead, we do what we're told, we eat it anyway, and then we're in the habit of eating incorrectly because we're doing it according to a plan that we were told is coming from the outside world. And so we get into that habit. And the way out of that habit is by what we refer to as mindfully eating, slowing down. That's especially the most important thing. One example of that stopping early, an example of that is there was an old Thai woman living in the United States, and she spent most of her time at Wat Metta. Wat Metta is the forest monastery from Achan Thanissaro. And so what she wanted to do was she wanted to eat the leftovers out of his bowl. That's actually kind of common in Thailand. And so he abided by that and worked with that in the sense that whenever he was eating out of his bowl, he had to remember that what he eats, she doesn't eat. And if he eats it all, she's got nothing. Unless he comes back and puts something in the bowl. So this is a way of thinking. Here at my house, I do that with the dogs. That the dogs have gotten used to being fed not table scraps. Sometimes they get the meat and I get whatever else is on the plate. But thinking about that sharing or stopping or that, how to say it, it's not that we've got enough. It's that we've got an overabundance. You're wealthy with food. And there's certainly enough to go around. And I don't have to eat it all just because I'm in the habit of eating it all.
Good points.
And so that idea of stopping early goes right along with the whole idea of watching what you eat to experience how full you are so that you'll know the right place to stop and to stop eating rather than continuing to eat because it's a habit or continuing to eat because it tastes good, rather that we find a time to quit that is much more, let us call it logical or human, rather than born of habit. And so that would be part of a good plan of learning how to eat in a new way. But most importantly would be to slow down. Now, one of the things that they used to say is that, oh, you've got to chew your food really, really well. And then they would do something stupid like say, chew it 30 times, each mouthful, chew it 30 times. Well, it depends upon what pudding, you can't chew pudding 30 times. And some things are so tough that even 30 is not enough. So it's not an idea to actually count, but what it is that when we're eating, we focus on the actual eating in the sense of what's going on inside the mouth. And so as we prepare a morsel to eat and put it in the mouth, one of the qualities then of this kind of eating is that we put our hands down, or we put down the spoon, or we even set the plate aside if you're holding the plate. So you'll take a bite and set the plate aside, and then spend all of the time focused on what's happening on the inside of the mouth. You'd be surprised. Because when you really start tasting the food, sometimes you say, I don't want this. This one comes out and give it to the dog. And so this is the way to begin to think about eating, is to think about it in the sense of slowing it down, paying very close attention to what's happening in the mouth. Even one of the ways that it's referred to in the Buddhist scriptures is to empty the mouth completely so that there's not even one grain of rice. So after we've eaten completely that morsel of food, we check with the tongue and roll around on the inside of the mouth to find if there's any food hidden away anywhere. And then we swallow that too. And then we pick up the knife and the fork or the spoon or whatever, and we prepare a new morsel, a small one normally. Another trick would be to start using smaller utensils, a smaller fork and a smaller spoon, rather than a big kitchen or a tablespoon. We get a teaspoon and we start eating with a teaspoon so that the morsels themselves become smaller. And then we roll it around in the mouth and we chew on it and we chew on it and find the various teeth that are good at chewing, etc., like that. And so we begin to understand what's going on. But like I say, the most important thing is to taste that food and be satisfied with that food. And if we're not satisfied with it, then let's take that out and eat something, put something else in the mouth and chew on that. Always with the idea that we're going to finish a little bit earlier than we used to, but we're slowing it way down. And there's a lot of different things that we can do to play with that. An example would be if you're eating with other people, make sure that they're finished with their food while you're still only about halfway through yours. And then it's a good time to stop, is when they have stopped. Or you eat on a little bit, but then you'll leave something. And so this is a new way of thinking about it, and it always has the quality of thinking about that food right here, right now. What am I doing with it at this particular moment?
Yeah, it's a good idea. I'm usually the first one to finish.
What? I'm sorry, I missed that.
I'm usually the first one to finish my plates.
Uh-huh. And
So
that's an old habit. So you can start to take this as an example of how to change the old habits of your eating so that you're going to eat a whole lot more healthily.
But I notice that for me, eating is often a way to distract myself from general unpleasantness. If I'm at work and there is some resistance to doing something, unpleasantness arise, and I want this unpleasantness to go away. So I think, oh yes, maybe a bit of food. So it's a distraction from whatever suffering is now.
That's very common in our society. It's especially common in Northern Europe. It's also very common in the sense of that's the way that the food companies want you to eat. And so they talk about how wonderful and pleasant their food is so that people will get the idea that, oh, I can come out of my suffering by eating whatever they're advertising.
Yeah.
All right. So there's a new way of doing that. And that is that the actual food that you need is air. We need to breathe more. We need to take a few deep breaths. That often is satisfying. That in fact, if we think food and we think, oh, it's going to make us feel better, and so I get up and go eat and get something to eat, by getting up and walking, I'm already breathing better than I was when I was just sitting. And so oftentimes by the time I get to the food, I don't eat it anymore, but that was the intention. So off we go, eating something that we don't need, thinking that it's going to solve a problem that I just solved.
Habits.
Right, exactly. And so that's what we've got to wake up to, is to wake up to these old habits. And one of the best ways to do that is by disrupting them, so that you can get used to seeing how that habit operates. And so cutting down on the eating, leaving some food on the plate. Remember, I'm going to leave some. I'm not going to eat it all. almost as if somebody else is waiting on this plate, maybe some child in India, or the dog, or the lady in the Watt, or whoever it is. This is their food, and if I eat it, not only will it be of no value to me, but it is harming that other person. And so we begin to wake up to the process of eating. We begin to watch what's going on inside the mouth. We begin to feel the various textures of the food, uh, uh, kind of separating the juices from the stronger parts, like juicy meat. If you press the piece of meat to the roof of your mouth, all the juice will come right out of it, leaving just um, the fibrous part. And so
Yeah.
this is what we need to start watching for. Pay close attention to the eating itself. And if you'll notice, most people, when they're eating, they're spending time looking at their plate, piddling with the food, moving things around, getting the next bite ready.
Yeah.
So one of the ways of slowing it down is to separate those. While you're chewing, just chew. While you're operating with one morsel of food, don't play with or prepare the next morsel. To leave the hands down, set the plate aside, put the utensils away. Or if you're eating with your hands, then the thing to do is to take a cloth and clean the hands and then put the hands down instead of back into the food. And then when we're finished with that morsel, then we can put the hands back into the food or pick up the utensil or whatever and get the next piece ready. And then when we put that in the mouth, then we set all the utensils down again. That alone will help slow it down. But the major slowdown is going to be to pay attention to actually what's happening in the mouth. So even if it's nothing but a piece of chocolate, and that we've gone to get that piece of chocolate. I've gotten up from my desk. I've gone and put my quarter or dollar or whatever into the machine and gotten the sweet, the chocolate out. And I take it back to the desk. Now I'm going to open that and put that piece of chocolate in the mouth, and I'm going to pay very, very close attention. I'm going to watch the chocolate melt. I'm going to figure out whether it needs to be chewed or not. But roll it around in the mouth and get very, very familiar with that piece of chocolate as it dissolves or melts away or whatever, leaving anything that needs to be crunched on to be crunched after it does its melting, like an almond that's in the middle of the chocolate or something
Yeah.
like that. And so this is the way then to really start paying attention to what we're eating. You'd be surprised, but there's a whole lot of stuff that you may stop eating altogether because you were just eating it out of habit
I think
rather than
that's
out of.
yeah, I think it's a very good exercise for me. I have a lot of eating habits. And if I learn how to break them, I have learned how to break every other habit, pretty much.
I would say you're certainly going in the right direction, especially in the sense that the sati that it takes to remember to do what I'm talking about doing is often not there. You'd be surprised that your real intention, oh, I'm going to remember how to eat this thing, and then all of a sudden, while I'm in, wait a minute, I was going to be mindful.
Yeah. I know that
And
feeling.
so, and so that's an important point is to, while you're eating food, use that whole food eating time as a time to be mindful of eating. To enjoy every morsel or to remove that morsel and don't let it, I mean, why put it down the throat if you're not enjoying chewing on it, then take it out. become more discerning about what's really worth eating. But you see, we're not taught that when we're kids. We're taught to eat what you're given.
Yeah.
If you don't eat those green peas, we're not going to give you any dessert, as if the dessert was actually better for you than the green peas. No, they're doing that because they think we want the chocolate cake or the dessert or whatever. So we get into the habit then is, oh, dessert. That's very special. That tastes better than green peas. And
It's
so
worth
we make
more.
those kind of decisions. It's worth more, right? And we make those kind of decisions when we're kids purely out of ignorance. Those are really ignorant decisions that we make when we're kids, and we pay for it later in life with poor health and other bad habits. And so the way to come out of that is with this mindfulness of eating, because if people cause a lot of suffering for themselves over food. One of them is that so much food is wasted. There's a lot of waste. And because of a lot of waste, that means a lot of production efforts for making the food was wasted effort. So if we didn't waste food, then it would be easier for us to get it. And I'm not talking about you or me individually. I'm talking about humanity in general. The humanity in general is kind of ill when it comes to eating. Mothers want their children to love them. Cooks want their food to be delicious. I'm a good cook if you like my food. And if you don't eat all of my food, I'm going to feel bad. And the cook will let you know. That way you got to eat all that the cook made, or she's going to feel bad. And so there's so much social stuff that is associated with the eating that is separate from the actual just eating. And so here we're going to take it right back to just eating.
It's also a cultural thing. Some places, if you eat the whole plate, you will kind of tell the cook that he didn't make enough because you ate everything. There is nothing left.
Yes, but in another place, if you eat it all, then that means that you want more.
Yeah.
And so they'll come and put more on your plate if you eat it all. And so in both cases, not eating it all is the best way to go. Except that then maybe the cook will feel bad because you don't. So 3 different houses with 3 different points of view. One is I didn't make enough. Number 2 is that you don't like it. Number 3 is, oh, you want more.
So the solution must be to be my own cook.
Yes, exactly. Is to learn what your own limits are, to learn. And the way to do that is to slow everything down. To make sure that you're eating only what you need to eat. To enjoy every morsel. That in fact, a lot of people are so, not say hungry, but they're in the habit of eating so that they eat so fast that they're still not satisfied because they didn't even bother to taste it. It's just you open the mouth and it goes right to the stomach.
Yes, that's kind of meat.
All right, so now you're going to take that intermediate time and spend, I don't know how long to take because it depends upon what kind of food you're eating. But you want to just chew and chew and chew. An example of that would be corn. That when you're eating corn, the kernels of corn, make sure that you're not going to swallow any of the kernels of corn without having them mashed.
That's a good deal of work.
Yes, it is. It takes effort. This is not an easy exercise. This is not just, oh, yeah, I'm going to do that. Oh, no, this is work. This is going to take right effort. This is going to take mindfulness, because it's so easy when you're eating to fall back into the habits that we had when we were children. And so if you fail, don't feel bad. Say, oh, well, at least I caught it this time. Next mouthful is going to be slow.
I know already it's gonna be a challenge, but I will get
But you
there.
can make it. You're a winner. You can do this.
Yes,
If
I
you
am.
could breathe correctly, yes, that's it. You can do this. It's going to be a challenge, and you're going to do it.
I'm the lion. I make the decisions.
Exactly so. Exactly.
Great. That's a good plan for my next period.
Okay. Well, call me in a few days and let me know how this is working out for you.
I'll try to call you next weekend.
So this is a continuation call from last time about mindfulness of eating. So how's it going for you?
Well, it haven't been perfect, of course, but it's a learning activity. But it's been surprisingly effective or easy. Usually when I eat, I just eat until I'm filled, and so fast that the full reflex have no time to activate.
You probably are eating in the habit that you developed when you were a child.
Yeah, a child, or at least somewhere earlier than I can remember.
So this is going to take some mindfulness. That, in fact, congratulations for remembering to practice mindfulness of eating, because actually mindfulness of eating is to remember, and that the important point is to remember it before the meal starts, before you take the first bite, that this is going to be a mindful meal. I'm going to remember this one. I'm going to remember every bite, etc., like that. And then you can begin to take pleasure in it, that this is actually a quite more pleasurable way of eating. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have that compulsion. It's just...
Well, here's the question: is the compulsion pulling you forward, or is it pushing from behind? Playing with the word propulsion here.
Not propulsion.
It is not the same thing.
But if I have to look at that way, from behind, I would say.
Okay. In TA, they call it a driver. And that we're often driven by the habit of the way that we have been behaving, and that basically it works with a trigger. And so for in the past, the trigger was, oh, here's food, let's do it. Now we're going to start having other triggers in there is, oh, this is a time, this is food, but now it's a time to be mindful. And so we pick up the mindfulness and start working with that. And with actually the intention of really enjoying the food. Here's an example of very typical. People will have, it's generally a cold drink rather than too hot. Regardless of how good coffee is, when it's too hot, we can only sip at it. But
Yeah.
but let us say a glass of milk or orange juice or Coca-Cola or whatever like that people like, they will actually almost open up and pour the liquid in, rather than taking a little bit in the mouth and swishing it around and get the real good, delicate flavor. They get that same good, delicate flavor while they've been drinking a glass or two glasses of it, rather than just a mouthful or a sip.
Yeah.
So make sure that when you're drinking, that you're not opening the gullet so that the milk goes right past. That you only take enough milk or orange juice or whatever it is that you're drinking, so that you can hold it in your mouth and then play with it and enjoy it and get the benefit out of it that you were wanting when you were gulping.
And that goes for water too.
Yes.
All right.
But it more so with sugared drinks, so that we don't need so much of it, that we can get all of that pleasure in just a mouthful or two rather than a huge gulp or two.
Yeah, the only sugar drinks I drink is juice. But I get the point. It's just the same exercise or practice.
Yes, exactly so. Well, with the same, let us say, with the same skill and with the same outcome, and that is the enjoyment of having a little, that we learn to enjoy having just enough.